Hello and welcome to Wheels Boy. For this video, we're going to be giving you a quick look at this, the new Geely Boyue X, Geely's latest entry into the compact SUV market here in China. Let's get started.
With hands-on test drives and reviews of exciting Chinese market vehicles, Wheels Boy is the #1 source for China auto insights. Be sure to check us out on Instagram and Facebook.
The Boyue X is a mid-cycle refresh of sorts for the original Boyue Pro, which was a mid-cycle refresh of the original Boyue. In this case, it's not an all-new car, but it does debut an all-new design language. Gone is the expanding Cosmos grille that we saw on the Geely Haoyue as well as the Geely Jiaji, and now we have Vision Starburst. Not a particularly catchy name, but it is, I guess, evocative. What that means is we have a very, in my opinion, Lexus-esque kind of complicated grille here, flanked by chrome elements, as well as some touches of color that were not present in the previous generation of car. Personally, I don't think it's unattractive, I don't think it's beautiful, but it's definitely more eye-catching than the previous car styling. There's not much going on here on the side that's different from the previous generation, though we do now have some black wheels instead of the regular alloys. This is the same design as last year's. On the rear as well, not much has changed. A slightly redesigned lower bumper, as well as a new black element here, hard to see on this black car, sorry, that connects the taillights instead of body color. Really overall, a kind of conservative but kind of handsome design in my opinion. Opening up the rear hatch, we don't have any official numbers as to the space here in terms of cubic liters or anything like that, but based on what I'm seeing, it is a very decent amount of space. This is only a two-row vehicle, so you would expect that. Here on the interior, the big story and the difference between this car and the Boyue Pro is an update here to the center screen's UI. They're now using what they call the Milky Way OS. Having experienced the previous OS in other Geely models, I would say this is a pretty considerable upgrade, both in terms of the ease of use of the UI as well as the snappiness of the system. There has been an upgrade to the chip that is used, inside of it as well. Other than that, the design language is more or less the same, which is to say these flowing lines here across the dash with integrated flip buttons. I always appreciate real physical buttons inside of my cars, as well as I do love these here, these grab handles, something you also find inside the Xingyue, another model from Geely. Here in the backseat of the Boyue X, we have a very reasonable amount of seat space. We've got two charging ports down here, one traditional USB and one lightning charging port, something I don't see in every car, and it's a nice little feature that I appreciate. Full down center armrest. Something I failed to point out when I was in the front, but I'd like to point out now, is that I very much like the color palette inside of this car. It's a nice, deep, rich red color that gives it somewhat of a premium feel. In terms of head space here, again, very reasonable and a very large sunroof. Interestingly, there are fewer engine options available this year than there were in the previous generation, the Boyue Pro. Under the hood is the 1.8-liter turbocharged four-cylinder, making 135 kilowatts and 300 newton meters of torque. That's about 180 horsepower and 220 pound-feet. I say there are fewer engine options because this car used to be available with something that Geely called BSG. That's their 48-volt mild hybrid system. That is no longer available. I have heard, however, that Geely is going to be coming out with a new hybrid system that's going to be replacing many of their old ones and hopefully it will be a vast improvement over the old system. What we have, of course, is this 1.8, and it delivers reasonable performance. I would say that there is no official 0 to 100 kilometer per hour time, but the seat of the pants meter says somewhere between 7 and 8 seconds. So perfectly adequate, if not particularly fast. Overall, it is meshed to a 7-speed DCT transmission, the shifts for which at low speeds have a little bit of delay, as most DCTs do, but the pairing does seem to work together quite smoothly. The Geely Boyue X has a multi-link rear suspension, McPherson struts up front. Many cars at this price point also have multi-link rear suspensions. The difference between this and those that do not isn't really obvious at low speeds. It's not until you get to taking corners at relatively high speeds and hitting a bump in the middle of them that you realize that it's a lot more composed than its non-independent rear suspension competitors. Overall, ride and handling, very acceptable for this price point and for this particular segment. Steering feel, not particularly great. In sport mode, though, it does have a decent amount of, I would say, heft to it, if not a lot of feel. Price-wise, this car runs from about $17,500 to $22,000 US dollars. To be honest with you, it feels like the Geely Boyue X is kind of a stopgap. What I mean is that they seem to be biding their time before they release an all-new generation of this car. However, I do think that the new upgrades like the new UI, the new design language, and things like that will make this still a pretty competitive car here in the Chinese market. Me, however, I'm really waiting for the more updated, all-new generation of this car, especially the hybrid powertrain that's said to be coming. All right, that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to check us out on Instagram and Facebook, links in the description below. And of course, like, subscribe, and hit the bell.